Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started.
The human mind is the greatest mystery we carry with us every day. It is where memories, emotions, dreams, and the decisions that shape our lives are born. But the more we study it, the more we discover that it holds secrets capable of surprising even science itself. Tonight, we will explore some of the most fascinating psychological phenomena ever discovered, revealing remarkable facts that will change the way you understand your thoughts, your memories, and even the way you perceive reality. People tend to be more honest late at night. As the day goes on, mental filters and social masks can begin to loosen. Late at night, when fatigue reduces inhibition and self-control, people may speak more directly and reveal thoughts they might keep to themselves during the day. This does not mean that every late-night conversation is an unfiltered truth, but reduced cognitive control can allow honesty to flow more easily. Psychologists also suggest that the quiet, intimate atmosphere of the night may encourage openness, with fewer distractions, dimmer lighting, and the feeling that the world is at rest. During these hours, conversations often drift into personal territory, sometimes deepening human connections. The phenomenon is not universal, but many people recognize the feeling. Words seem to flow more freely under the cover of night, as if the mind relaxes into its natural rhythm and long-hidden thoughts finally come to light. Multitasking makes your memory less reliable. Although it may feel efficient, juggling several tasks at the same time can weaken how well you remember them. The brain's attention system works best when it is focused, and dividing that attention forces information to compete for mental resources. This can result in memories that are less detailed or even completely missing. For example, trying to check messages while listening to a friend may cause you to forget key parts of the conversation. Studies show that people who multitask frequently may also have a harder time filtering out irrelevant information, making it more difficult to concentrate over time. The appeal of multitasking lies in the feeling of being productive, but the mind records life more richly when it is allowed to focus on one thing at a time. In a world that demands constant switching, choosing to do just one thing slowly may feel like a luxury your memory will appreciate. Another person's touch can reduce pain. The warmth of a hand on your shoulder or someone holding your hand can do more than provide comfort. It can change the way your brain perceives pain. Physical touch activates sensory pathways that compete with pain signals, reducing their intensity. It also triggers the release of oxytocin, a hormone associated with bonding and stress reduction. In one study, couples who held hands during a painful experience not only reported less discomfort, but their brain waves also began to synchronize. This suggests that touch does more than provide emotional comfort. It may create a shared physiological state that helps ease suffering. In moments of distress, a gentle touch can serve as both a shield and an anchor, reminding the body that it is not alone. Sometimes the simplest gestures carry the deepest healing power. Scents can influence your decisions without you realizing it. Smells often bypass conscious thought, traveling directly to the brain regions involved in emotion and memory. This direct pathway means that scents can influence mood and behavior without our awareness. In experiments, pleasant ambient scents in stores have been shown to increase the likelihood of making a purchase, while the smell of cleaning products can lead people to clean more. These subtle effects work because scent can prime certain thoughts or associations. Lavender may promote a sense of calm, while citrus scents can signal freshness and energy. Although we often think of decisions as being purely rational, the truth is that invisible sensory cues can tip the balance. Becoming aware of this influence can be empowering, allowing us to recognize when our choices are being shaped by the silent language of scent. The placebo sleep effect can make you feel more rested. In a fascinating twist of psychology, simply believing that you slept well can improve your performance and mood the next day, even if you did not. In one study, participants who were told they had achieved above-average sleep quality performed better on cognitive tests regardless of how well they had actually slept. This effect, known as placebo sleep, shows how expectations can shape both mental and physical states. The brain uses belief as a shortcut, adjusting energy levels and focus according to perceived rest. Of course, real sleep is irreplaceable for good health, but this phenomenon reveals the mind's remarkable ability to influence how the body feels. It suggests that part of feeling rested comes not only from the hours spent sleeping, but also from the story we tell ourselves about that rest. Your mind may sense when someone is watching you. Many people have experienced the strange feeling of being watched, only to turn around and discover that it is true. Although science has not fully explained this phenomenon, some research suggests that subtle cues, such as changes in shadows, shifts in peripheral vision, or even faint sounds, may alert us unconsciously. The brain is finely tuned to detect social attention because knowing when eyes are on us has been vital throughout human history. Evolutionary psychologists propose that this sensitivity helped our ancestors avoid predators and navigate complex social interactions. Whether through subtle perception or a deeper instinct, the feeling can be so persuasive that it prompts action before conscious thought catches up. It is a quiet reminder from the oldest part of ourselves. Body language can reveal feelings you have not admitted to yourself. Posture, gestures, and micro-expressions often reveal emotions that we have not consciously recognized. For example, crossed arms may signal defensiveness, while subtle changes in tone of voice may indicate discomfort. Psychologists point out that these signals are sometimes visible to others before they become clear to us, providing an external mirror of our internal state. Becoming aware of your own body language can reveal hidden stress, attraction, or excitement. Likewise, learning to read other people's nonverbal signals can deepen empathy and understanding. This silent language operates alongside speech and sometimes speaks more honestly than words. During moments of self-reflection, noticing how your body is positioned can be like listening to your mind's unspoken thoughts. Scents can unlock memories buried for a lifetime. The human sense of smell is deeply connected to the brain's memory systems. Unlike sight or hearing, scent bypasses much of the brain's usual processing pathways and connects directly with the limbic system, the center of emotion and long-term memory. That is why the faint trace of a perfume, the smell of fresh rain on pavement, or the aroma of childhood meals cooking can feel like a time machine. These scent-triggered memories are often vivid, detailed, and deeply emotional, even if the events they recall took place decades ago. Psychologists call this the Proust effect, named after the author who wrote about tasting a madeleine and being transported back to his childhood. Moments like these remind us that our minds are not simple filing cabinets but living landscapes, where scents act like keys capable of opening long-closed doors and allowing forgotten feelings to quietly return to the present. Lucid dreams allow you to control the dream world. During a lucid dream, you become aware that you are dreaming, and with that awareness, you can sometimes shape the dream itself. People who experience lucid dreams report flying over mountains, breathing underwater, or rewriting the events of their dreams as they unfold. Psychologists believe that lucid dreams occur when the parts of the brain associated with self-awareness become active during sleep. While lucid dreaming happens naturally for some people, others train themselves using techniques such as reality checks and dream journals. Research has even shown that practicing skills during lucid dreams can improve real-world performance. But beyond any practical benefits, lucid dreaming offers something even deeper, a reminder that our minds can create entire worlds filled with detail and emotion, worlds we can walk through as though they were real. And within those worlds, we are both the traveler and the architect. People remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones. Imagine working on a project, stepping away before it is finished, and noticing that it keeps lingering in your mind. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Our brains hold on to unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. This open mental loop evolved to help us remember what still needs to be done. But it can also keep us awake at night, replaying conversations or reminding us of work left unfinished. Studies suggest that the effect occurs because unresolved activities create a kind of mild mental tension, and completing the task releases it. That is why making a to-do list can feel surprisingly reassuring. It tells the brain that the task has been accounted for, even if it has not yet been completed. In everyday life, this effect can be both a powerful motivator and a source of stress, depending on how we use it. Either way, it is a powerful example of the mind's unfinished business. Gratitude can reduce stress hormones in your body. The act of feeling and expressing gratitude is more than just a polite habit because it can change your body's chemistry. Studies have found that people who regularly focus on what they are grateful for have lower levels of cortisol, the hormone released during stress. Gratitude practices, such as keeping a daily journal or reflecting on positive moments before going to sleep, can also increase activity in brain regions associated with empathy and joy. This is not just a pleasant shift in mood, but a physiological response that may strengthen the immune system, improve sleep quality, and even support heart health. Psychologists suggest that gratitude shifts attention away from what is missing and toward what is abundant, creating a sense of security and connection. In this way, it helps the mind relax, allowing the body to follow. A single thought of gratitude held quietly for a moment can spread through the nervous system like a calming tide. People can be influenced by words they barely perceive. Sometimes the mind responds to messages it does not consciously notice. In psychology, this is called subliminal priming, the presentation of stimuli so brief or subtle that they fall below the threshold of conscious awareness and still influence thoughts or behavior. In one study, flashing positive or negative words for only milliseconds before showing a neutral image changed the way participants rated the emotional tone of that image. Advertisers and artists have long been fascinated by this effect, although its influence in everyday life is far more subtle than popular myths suggest. Even so, it reveals an important truth. Our conscious minds are not the only gatekeepers of perception. Beneath awareness, the brain is constantly scanning, filtering, and interpreting signals. Most of these impressions never surface in words, but they can shape our decisions, influence our impressions, and leave us with feelings we cannot fully explain. They are whispers from the edge of perception. Music can awaken hidden memories decades later. A song from your teenage years can instantly transport you back to a school hallway, a summer afternoon, or a person you have not spoken to in years. Music has a unique relationship with memory because it engages multiple parts of the brain at the same time: auditory regions, motor areas, and, most importantly, the limbic system. Rhythm, melody, and lyrics weave together to create a rich context, and when that song plays again, the original emotions return with it. For people living with Alzheimer's disease, familiar music can sometimes awaken moments of clarity, allowing them to sing lyrics they otherwise could not remember. Psychologists believe that music acts as a powerful retrieval cue, one that bypasses some of the barriers created by time and memory loss. It is a reminder that even when memories seem lost, they may still remain within us, waiting for the right note to set them free. Optimism can speed recovery from illness. Hope and positive expectations are not just comforting. They may also be biologically protective. Studies have shown that optimistic people often recover more quickly from surgery, respond better to certain treatments, and have lower rates of some chronic illnesses. Optimism appears to reduce harmful stress responses, encourage healthier behaviors, and even strengthen the immune system. This does not mean ignoring reality or forcing a smile through difficult times. Rather, it means believing that challenges can be overcome and that the future holds possibilities. Psychologists suggest that optimism may help people stay committed to rehabilitation, follow medical advice more consistently, and maintain the mental resilience needed for healing. While the body quietly carries out its work of repair, the mind's outlook may tip the odds in our favor, turning hope into a kind of invisible medicine that moves through every heartbeat and every breath. People remember gossip better than neutral information. Human beings evolved in small social groups where knowing whom to trust could mean the difference between safety and danger. This may explain why our brains are wired to remember gossip and stories about other people's behavior more easily than neutral facts. In experiments, participants were more likely to remember details about untrustworthy actions than physical descriptions or unrelated events. Gossip activates the brain's social reasoning networks, capturing attention and helping store information for future use. Although gossip can be harmful, it may also serve a protective function by helping groups maintain social norms and avoid risks. In the modern world, this tendency can be seen in how rumors spread more quickly than ordinary news. Whether whispered around a campfire thousands of years ago or shared online today, gossip's staying power lies in the brain's deep interest in the behavior of others. Déjà vu may result from a brief glitch in the brain's recognition systems. That strange feeling that you have experienced a moment before is still not fully understood. One leading theory suggests that it happens when the brain's recognition system briefly misfires, creating a false sense of familiarity. This can occur when a new experience closely matches patterns from past memories, even if you cannot recall the original event. Brain imaging studies suggest that the temporal lobe, especially the areas involved in memory, plays a key role. For most people, déjà vu is brief and harmless, but it offers a glimpse into how the brain weaves together the present and the past. In that fleeting instant, reality seems doubled, with the present layered over the ghost of a past that may never have existed. It is a reminder that perception is not a perfect recording but an interpretation. And sometimes, the mind's storyteller gets ahead of itself. People speak faster when they are nervous. As anxiety rises, the speed of our speech often increases as well. This is driven in part by the body's fight-or-flight response, which raises heart rate and breathing. The brain, preparing for rapid action, pushes thoughts forward more quickly, and the mouth struggles to keep up. Speakers may skip pauses, rush through sentences, or stumble over words as adrenaline heightens the urgency to be understood. This effect can be subtle, a slight increase in pace, or so pronounced that words begin to blur together. In social situations, rapid speech can sometimes make others feel anxious as well, because emotional states tend to spread throughout groups. Understanding this pattern can be helpful. Deliberately slowing your speech can calm the body, and in turn, a calm body can soothe the mind. In this way, speech becomes not only a reflection of your emotional state, but also a tool for guiding it. Much of the human brain remains a mystery. Despite all of our advances in neuroscience, vast regions of the brain are still only partially understood. We can map structures, trace electrical signals, and observe patterns of activity. Yet the deepest mystery of how consciousness emerges, or why memories feel so vivid, still escapes us. Some brain regions do not yet have a fully defined function, and the intricate networks connecting them are more complex than any computer humans have ever built. Every new study reveals not only answers but also new questions, reminding us that we have explored only a small fraction of this living universe inside our skulls. Like an ocean whose surface we have only skimmed while its depths remain dark, the brain contains entire continents of knowledge still waiting to be discovered. And in the quiet moments between one thought and the next, we are reminded that the mind is not merely a biological machine, but a mystery we inhabit every moment we are awake. Most of your thoughts are repetitions of the previous day. Research suggests that most of our daily thoughts are recycled from earlier days, familiar worries, routines, and reflections that repeat themselves in slightly different forms. This mental repetition helps maintain a sense of stability, but it can also limit creativity and keep us trapped in old patterns. The brain favors efficiency, and reusing existing neural pathways requires less effort than creating new ones. However, when we intentionally seek out new experiences, challenge our assumptions, or change our surroundings, we can generate new patterns of thought. That is why traveling, learning new skills, or even taking a different route to work can feel so refreshing. It shakes the mind out of autopilot and brings it into conscious awareness. Most of the time, our thoughts travel along well-worn paths, but every now and then we can step off the trail and discover an entirely new landscape within ourselves. Yawning can be contagious, even across species. A single yawn can spread through an entire room, passing from person to person without a single word being spoken. This contagious effect is not limited to humans. It has been observed in chimpanzees, dogs, and even some bird species, which can catch yawns from others. Psychologists believe the phenomenon is linked to empathy and social bonding. We unconsciously mirror the behavior of those around us, strengthening our connections with one another. In humans, the likelihood of catching a yawn increases with emotional closeness. You are more likely to yawn after seeing a friend yawn than a stranger. The act itself remains partly mysterious. While yawning helps regulate brain temperature and promote alertness, its social spread appears to serve a different purpose, silently synchronizing the rhythms of a group. In a way, a shared yawn is a quiet reminder of our biological connection to one another, a small, unspoken gesture that says we are together in this moment. Hypnosis can change the way the brain processes pain. Under hypnosis, a person may sometimes experience less pain, or even none at all, during situations that would normally cause discomfort. Brain scans show that hypnosis can alter activity in the areas responsible for interpreting pain signals, changing not the sensation itself but the way the brain perceives it. This has been used in medical settings for pain management, dental procedures, and even surgery, although it does not work equally well for everyone. Psychologists describe hypnosis as a focused and highly suggestible state in which the mind can change its responses. The effect is not magic. It is the brain's own flexibility at work. By adjusting perception, the mind can rewrite the body's experience. This connection between attention and sensation hints at a profound truth. Pain is not merely a physical event, but a complex dialogue between the nerves, the brain, and consciousness. And sometimes consciousness can change the strength of that conversation. Writing about your feelings can improve your health. Putting emotions into words, whether in a journal or a private note, can have measurable effects on well-being. Studies have shown that expressive writing can lower blood pressure, strengthen immune function, and improve mood. Psychologists believe the process helps organize emotional experiences, transforming vague feelings into structured thoughts that the brain can process. This reduces mental strain and frees cognitive resources for other tasks. Writing does not require perfect grammar or style because its power lies in honesty. By translating inner experiences into language, we give shape to what once had none, and in doing so, we lessen its hold over us. The page becomes a safe container for what might otherwise feel overwhelming in the mind. Over time, this practice can help untangle complex emotions, making them easier to understand and carry. We remember feelings more easily than facts. The human mind is deeply emotional, and that shapes the way we remember. Events connected to intense emotions such as joy, fear, sorrow, or excitement tend to remain in memory longer than neutral details. This emotional tagging helps the brain prioritize important experiences, but it also means that we often remember how we felt more clearly than what actually happened. In eyewitness testimony, for example, the emotional intensity of an event can influence memory, sometimes reducing the accuracy of factual details. On the positive side, remembering the emotions tied to meaningful moments can reinforce values, relationships, and life lessons. Our memories are not perfect recordings, but stories told from the heart's perspective. When we think about the past, we often walk through a landscape of feelings, with the facts scattered like stones along the path. Chewing gum can improve concentration. It may seem like a small and insignificant habit, but chewing gum has been linked to improvements in attention and alertness. The rhythmic movement appears to increase blood flow to the brain, while the act of chewing may also stimulate areas involved in attention and memory. Some studies have shown modest improvements in performance on tasks requiring sustained concentration when participants chew gum, especially peppermint-flavored varieties. The effect is not dramatic, but it may provide a subtle boost in mental energy, helping explain why students, drivers, and even soldiers have used it during long and demanding periods. Psychologists also suggest that chewing gum may reduce stress by lowering cortisol levels, offering a double benefit for concentration. In those quiet moments when your focus begins to drift, this simple action can serve as a small anchor, gently bringing your mind back to the present task. The first and last things you learn are remembered most strongly. Our memories are influenced by what psychologists call the primacy and recency effects, the tendency to remember the first and last items in a sequence better than those in the middle. The first items benefit from greater rehearsal and attention, while the last ones remain fresh in short-term memory. This pattern appears throughout everyday life. We often remember the opening and closing moments of a conversation, a lecture, or even a vacation more vividly than everything in between. Understanding this can improve learning. Placing key information at the beginning or end of a study session increases the chances that it will stick. In a way, the mind frames experiences like stories, with the opening and closing scenes shining the brightest. The middle still matters, but it is often the first impression and the final moment that remain in the mind's quiet archives the longest. Your brain can overlook changes happening right in front of you. Change blindness is one of the most surprising quirks of perception. The brain can fail to notice even major changes in a scene if they occur during a brief distraction or visual interruption. In experiments, people may look directly at an object, glance away for a moment, and fail to notice that it has completely changed when they look back. This happens because attention is selective. We cannot process every detail, so the brain fills in the gaps with assumptions based on prior knowledge. In everyday life, change blindness may explain why we fail to notice small rearrangements in a room or overlook a friend's new haircut. It is a reminder that perception is not a perfect camera. Instead, it is a mosaic of focused details and inferred continuity, woven together so seamlessly that we rarely notice the missing pieces unless someone points them out. Smiling can trick your brain into feeling happier. Even if you do not feel cheerful, the simple act of smiling can subtly change your mood. Psychologists call this the facial feedback hypothesis, the idea that facial expressions can influence emotional states. When you smile, the muscles in your face send signals to your brain, triggering the release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. This can create a small boost in mood, even if nothing else changes. The effect also works in reverse. Frowning or maintaining an angry expression can reinforce feelings of tension or frustration. It is not a miracle cure, but in stressful moments, a deliberate smile can be a gentle nudge toward a calmer state. That is why some people practice a soft smile during meditation, a relaxed and almost imperceptible curve of the lips. It is a reminder that the mind and body are deeply intertwined and that, sometimes, happiness can begin with one simple, intentional expression. Your subconscious can influence whom you find attractive. Attraction feels like a conscious choice, but many of its foundations are laid beneath conscious awareness. Subtle cues such as facial symmetry, tone of voice, or even a person's scent can trigger responses rooted in both biology and experience. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that some preferences may be linked to indicators of health, while others are shaped by cultural norms and personal history. The subconscious also weaves together associations. A certain laugh may remind you of someone kind, or a hairstyle may bring to mind a beloved figure from your past. These impressions often form before the conscious mind begins its analysis, creating a sense of instant chemistry. It is a reminder that attraction is both ancient and deeply personal, a dance between instincts refined over thousands of years and the unique pathways shaped by our own lives, quietly guiding our eyes and hearts before we even realize they have chosen a direction. Flow states can make hours feel like minutes. A flow state is a mental space where focus feels effortless, time seems elastic, and the outside world fades away. Artists, athletes, and scientists often describe becoming completely absorbed in their work and emerging hours later feeling energized rather than exhausted. Psychologists say that flow occurs when the challenge of a task matches your level of skill, difficult enough to engage you fully, but not so difficult that it overwhelms you. In this state, the brain reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with self-awareness, allowing attention to merge completely with the task. Flow is not simply peak productivity. It is a deeply satisfying state of immersion where action and awareness become one. Many people experience it while pursuing hobbies, creative projects, or even solving problems at work. In the quiet trance of flow, minutes dissolve into moments, and the mind moves as smoothly as a river finding its way to the sea. People can develop new senses through technology. Technology can extend human perception beyond its natural limits, effectively giving us new senses. Some researchers have created devices that translate non-visual data, such as magnetic fields or ultrasonic distances, into tactile signals that the brain can learn to interpret. Over time, users begin to perceive these signals as naturally as sight or touch, integrating them into everyday awareness. For example, a belt that vibrates when pointing north can eventually give a person an intuitive sense of direction, similar to that of migratory animals. These enhancements demonstrate the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to adapt to new streams of information and weave them into perception. Although these tools are still experimental, they point toward a future in which human senses could expand to detect ultraviolet light, infrared heat, or even the chemical composition of the air, opening entire dimensions of experience that we can now only imagine. Learning something new physically reshapes your brain. Every time you learn a new skill or concept, the neural networks in your brain change. This process, called synaptic plasticity, strengthens existing connections and forms new ones, allowing information to be stored and retrieved more efficiently. In practical terms, this means that your brain is not static, but a constantly changing structure shaped by your experiences. Magnetic resonance imaging studies show that learning activities, from playing an instrument to practicing a language, can even increase the size of certain brain regions over time. These physical changes happen more rapidly during childhood, but they continue throughout life, proving that it is never too late to learn. The act of learning is like walking across a field until a faint trail becomes a well-worn path. Each time you return, the path becomes clearer, and the landscape of your mind expands, one connection at a time. Your mood can literally change what you see in the world. Emotions do not merely color our thoughts, but can also alter our visual perception. Studies have shown that people in a positive mood are more likely to notice subtle details and perceive a wider range of colors, while those who feel anxious may narrow their focus, scanning for threats and overlooking neutral or calming signals. This happens because mood influences the brain's attention systems, adjusting how sensory information is filtered and interpreted. A joyful state may make a sunset appear more vivid, while fear can make a dimly lit street feel darker than it actually is. In this way, perception is not a purely objective process, but is shaped by the lens of the mind at every moment. Changing your mood can literally change your world, revealing that the boundary between the mind's internal state and the external environment is far less fixed than we imagine. People are more likely to help when they are the only witnesses. In emergency situations, the presence of other people can sometimes reduce the likelihood that someone will intervene, a phenomenon known as the bystander effect. When alone, people feel a greater personal responsibility to act. When surrounded by a crowd, responsibility becomes distributed, and each person assumes that someone else will help. This effect has been observed in countless experiments, from simulated accidents to objects dropped in the street. The more people who are present, the less likely any one person is to intervene. However, awareness of the bystander effect can counteract it because people who understand it are more likely to act regardless of the crowd. It is a reminder that during moments when help is needed, looking to others can be a trap. Sometimes, the person who must act simply has to be you, even when you are the only one who notices the need. The smell of stress can affect other people's reactions. When a person is stressed, the body can release chemical compounds through sweat that carry subtle signals to those nearby. Research has found that smelling these stress-related odors, even without consciously noticing them, can activate areas of the brain associated with empathy and fear, making others more alert or anxious. This suggests that stress can spread socially, not only through tone of voice or facial expressions, but also through scent. Although this effect probably evolved to help groups detect and respond to danger, in modern life, it means that tension in a room can quietly spread from one person to another. Understanding this can be freeing, because just as stress can be contagious, calmness can be contagious as well. By managing our own state, we can influence the emotional atmosphere around us in ways that no one may fully explain, but everyone can feel. Nostalgia can make you feel physically warmer. Nostalgia is not only a warm feeling in the heart, but can literally make your body feel warmer. Experiments have shown that recalling cherished memories can increase perceived temperature and even reduce the sensation of physical cold. Psychologists believe this connection may be rooted in evolutionary needs, because social warmth and physical warmth are intertwined in the brain, and both are linked to feelings of safety and belonging. When we revisit happy moments from the past, our bodies respond as though we had entered a more comfortable environment. During the winter months, people often experience more nostalgic thoughts, perhaps as a way of counteracting the cold. Whether triggered by a familiar song, a photograph, or the smell of a favorite meal, nostalgia can wrap the mind and body in a gentle blanket of remembered comfort. Fear can be transmitted through observation alone. You do not have to experience a threat firsthand to feel afraid, because simply watching someone else react with fear can trigger your own response. This happens because the brain contains mirroring systems that simulate the emotions of others, allowing us to learn about dangers indirectly. In studies, people who watched someone else show signs of fear toward a specific object later displayed similar fear responses, even without direct exposure. This mechanism probably evolved to help us avoid harm by learning from the experiences of others. In everyday life, it means that fear can spread through groups in seconds, influencing behavior before any words are spoken. Just as calmness can be contagious, alarm can be contagious as well, making emotional awareness a powerful tool for shaping the collective mood of those around us. Authority figures can cause ordinary people to obey extreme orders. During the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted experiments showing that ordinary people, under the direction of an authority figure, administered what they believed were painful electric shocks to others. The study revealed how social pressure and the presence of authority can override personal morality, leading people to act in ways they would never choose on their own. Although controversial, the findings have been reflected in other settings, from military environments to workplace hierarchies. The effect is rooted in our tendency to trust perceived experts and transfer responsibility when following orders. This does not mean that people are powerless, because awareness of this influence can strengthen resistance. It is a reminder that moral courage sometimes means stepping out of the shadow of authority and reclaiming personal choice, even when every voice around you says to simply do what you were told. Peripheral vision detects movement faster than central vision. Your eyes perceive more detail at the center, but they are faster at detecting movement around the edges. Peripheral vision is highly sensitive to motion, a survival trait from a time when noticing a sudden rustle could mean detecting a predator or prey. This sensitivity is connected to the rod cells in the outer retina, which are better at detecting light and movement under low-contrast conditions. In modern life, this means that you may notice something moving out of the corner of your eye before consciously looking at it. It is part of the brain's early warning system, constantly scanning for changes and ready to direct your attention where it is needed most. In the quiet edges of your vision, the past endures like an ancient watchtower that still stands guard. Writing by hand can improve memory more than typing on a keyboard. Handwriting engages the brain differently from typing because it involves fine motor skills, visual processing, and spatial awareness all at once. This richer sensory experience helps encode information more deeply, making it easier to remember later. Students who take notes by hand often remember concepts better, even if they write less overall, because summarizing information in real time requires active engagement with the material. Writing by hand also slows the pace, giving the mind more time to process ideas. While typing is fast and efficient, handwriting can serve as a form of mindful learning, with every stroke becoming a physical trace of thought recorded not only on paper, but also in the neural patterns of memory. Smiling can trick your brain into feeling happier. Even without genuine joy, forming a smile can gently push your brain toward a lighter mood. This happens because the facial muscles send feedback signals to the brain, influencing emotional processing. Studies show that people who hold a pen between their teeth to simulate a smile report greater amusement while watching cartoons than those who frown. The effect is not about pretending to be happy, but about creating a small physical signal that the brain interprets as a sign of safety and positivity. Over time, this gentle feedback loop can become a quiet tool for shifting perspective, especially during moments when the day feels heavy. We judge faces in less than 1/10 of a second. The human brain forms impressions of faces almost instantly, in less than 1/10 of a second. Research shows that even such brief exposure is enough for people to decide whether someone appears trustworthy, competent, or likable. These lightning-fast judgments come from ancient survival mechanisms, when quickly determining whether someone was a friend or an enemy could mean the difference between life and death. The amygdala and other brain regions process facial signals at remarkable speed, long before conscious thought has time to intervene. Although first impressions can be surprisingly consistent among observers, they are not always accurate. Our minds often rely on learned stereotypes and personal experiences to fill in the gaps. This ultra-fast evaluation is a reminder that part of us still operates through instincts formed long before cities, screens, and presentations, when a single glance could determine the course of survival. Seeing images of eyes in a room can make people more honest. Simply placing an image of eyes in a space, such as above a donation box, can make people behave more generously and honestly. Psychologists believe this happens because the feeling of being watched activates social responsibility, even when the eyes are only printed on paper. This effect is connected to our evolutionary past, when reputation and belonging to a group were essential for survival. Being seen meant that your actions mattered, and the brain still responds to these subtle signals today. Interestingly, the eyes do not need to look realistic, because even stylized designs can produce the effect. It is a quiet example of how deeply rooted social instincts continue to shape behavior in ways we rarely notice, turning a simple image into an invisible reminder that someone might be watching. People often overestimate how much others notice them. The spotlight effect describes our tendency to believe that other people are paying more attention to us than they actually are. This can make small mistakes, such as stumbling on the sidewalk or mispronouncing a word, feel far more noticeable than they really are. In truth, most people are too focused on their own thoughts to observe us closely. This bias comes from the way we experience life. We are the central figure in our own story, so we assume that others are equally focused on us. Understanding the spotlight effect can be freeing because it reduces social anxiety and self-consciousness. When we realize that most eyes are turned inward, our small stumbles lose their weight, and we can move through the world with a lighter step without imagining an audience where none exists. The placebo effect can work even when you know it is a placebo. It sounds impossible, but studies show that a placebo, an inactive treatment, can still produce real effects even when the person receiving it knows that it is not actual medicine. In these cases, the explanation that the placebo may trigger the body's own healing mechanisms is often enough to create measurable changes, such as reduced pain or improved mood. Psychologists suggest that this works through expectation and conditioning. The ritual of treatment, combined with belief in the body's ability to heal, activates pathways in the brain that influence physical states. The open-label placebo effect reveals how deeply intertwined the mind and body are, and how belief can shape biology even without deception. It is a reminder that sometimes awareness itself can become a form of medicine. People often remember emotions better than details. Think of a meaningful moment. You may remember the rush of joy, the weight of sorrow, or the sting of embarrassment, but not the exact sequence of events. This happens because emotions are processed and stored in areas of the brain closely connected to memory, such as the amygdala, making them easier to retrieve than factual details. Although this emotional focus can help guide future decisions, it can also blur the accuracy of our memories. We may remember how a day felt while losing track of the specific details. This is why two people can share the same experience and still remember it differently. In the story of our lives, emotion is often the ink and details are the paper. Without feeling, a memory fades, but with it, even vague outlines can remain vivid for years. Forgetting can be just as important as remembering. Forgetting may seem like a flaw, but it is an essential part of how memory works. The brain constantly receives vast amounts of information, and letting go of less useful details helps make room for what matters most. Psychologists believe that forgetting allows us to generalize from past experiences instead of becoming lost in specific details. It also prevents outdated information from interfering with new learning. This adaptive forgetting can be compared to pruning a tree, removing old branches so that healthy ones can grow. Far from being a sign of weakness, the ability to forget is one of the ways the mind remains efficient and focused, ensuring that the memories we carry are the most relevant to our present and future. Our brain can adapt to seeing the world upside down. In classic experiments, people wore special glasses that inverted their vision, turning the world upside down. At first, the experience was disorienting, but within a few days, the brain adapted. Objects appeared upright again, even though the image entering the eyes was still inverted. This remarkable flexibility is an example of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself in response to new stimuli. When the glasses were removed, vision temporarily seemed inverted again until the brain readjusted. The finding shows that perception is not a fixed recording, but an active construction that is constantly shaped by the brain's interpretation of sensory information. Even something as fundamental as up and down is, in part, a matter of adaptation. Group decisions can be riskier than individual ones. In certain situations, groups tend to make bolder and riskier decisions than people would make on their own, a phenomenon called group polarization. This can happen because discussion often strengthens dominant opinions, while shared enthusiasm can make potential dangers seem less important. The effect can be seen in settings ranging from business meetings to political rallies. Although collective decision-making can benefit from diverse perspectives, it can also lead to a risky shift in which the desire for unity and momentum outweighs caution. Being aware of this tendency allows groups to counteract it by encouraging dissenting voices and deliberate pauses. In the end, the group mind can be a powerful tool, but like any tool, it must be used carefully. Optical illusions reveal how reality is reconstructed inside your mind. Optical illusions work because the brain does not merely receive sensory information. It interprets it, filling in gaps and making predictions. When these predictions conflict with the raw data, the result can be an image that appears to change, move, or hide details that are clearly visible. Illusions reveal the shortcuts the brain uses to make sense of the world quickly. These mental shortcuts usually serve us well, but they remind us that what we see is a version of reality reconstructed inside our minds, not reality itself. Every perception is, in a sense, a personalized interpretation influenced by past experiences, expectations, and context. Laughter can rewire your brain for resilience. Laughter is not just a reaction. It is a form of mental exercise that can build resilience. When we laugh, the brain releases endorphins and lowers levels of stress hormones, creating a physiological state that makes it easier to face challenges. Shared laughter strengthens social bonds, providing a support network that is essential during difficult times. Over time, these moments of joy can act like repeated training sessions for the nervous system, teaching it to recover more quickly from stress. In this way, laughter becomes more than a temporary pleasure. It becomes a resource stored in the body and mind, ready to be used when life demands courage. Having a sense of purpose can extend your life expectancy. Research shows that people who feel a strong sense of purpose, a clear reason to get up each morning, often live longer and healthier lives. Purpose provides motivation, which can encourage healthier habits, reduce stress, and strengthen social connections. It also appears to benefit the body directly, with studies linking a sense of purpose to lower levels of inflammatory markers and better cardiovascular health. This does not mean that your purpose has to be grand or world-changing. It can be as personal as caring for loved ones, pursuing a creative passion, or contributing to a community. Having something meaningful to work toward acts like a compass for the mind, guiding choices and maintaining resilience. During difficult times, purpose can serve as a steady light on the horizon, a reason to keep moving forward, one step at a time through the days. Your brain has a network dedicated to recognizing faces. Deep within the temporal lobe lies the fusiform face area, a specialized region devoted to recognizing faces. This network is so finely tuned that it can identify familiar faces in less than a second, even in a crowd. Damage to this area can result in prosopagnosia, or face blindness, a condition in which people can see facial features but have difficulty recognizing even close friends or family members. The importance of this system is rooted in our evolutionary history. Reading faces has been vital for detecting emotions, recognizing allies, and building social bonds. Surprisingly, this network does not only process human faces, it can also adapt to recognize other familiar patterns, such as the markings of pets or the shape of a beloved object. It is a testament to the brain's deep investment in connection, shaping our ability to recognize the people who matter most to us. Meditation can physically alter brain structures. Meditation is more than a mental exercise. Long-term practice can physically change the brain. Magnetic resonance imaging studies have found increased thickness in the prefrontal cortex, an area associated with decision-making and self-control, as well as changes in the hippocampus, which plays a role in memory and learning. Regular meditation may also reduce the size of the amygdala, the brain's center for fear and stress responses, suggesting a greater capacity for calm. These structural changes reflect neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reconfigure itself in response to experience. Even short daily sessions can begin to alter neural patterns, improving attention, emotional regulation, and overall well-being. In a world that often feels rushed and noisy, Meditation offers a way to reshape the mind from the inside out, weaving inner stillness into the very fabric of the brain. People can experience an out-of-body perspective in certain situations. During near-death experiences, deep meditation, or even targeted brain stimulation, people report feeling as though they have left their bodies, observing themselves from above or from a distance. Neuroscientists have linked these experiences to disruptions in the brain's integration of sensory information, particularly in the temporoparietal junction. Although often brief, these moments can feel vivid and profoundly real, leaving lasting impressions on those who experience them. Out-of-body perceptions can change a person's sense of identity and deepen existential curiosity. Whether interpreted as spiritual events or neurological phenomena, they highlight the remarkable role of the brain in creating the sense of self, a sense that, under the right conditions, can become untethered and seem to float beyond the boundaries of the physical form. The priming effect can change behavior without you realizing it. It occurs when exposure to certain words, images, or ideas subtly influences later behavior. For example, reading words associated with politeness may cause people to interrupt less often during a conversation, while seeing references to aging may slow their walking speed, all without conscious awareness. This happens because the brain uses recently activated concepts as shortcuts that shape perception and response. Although priming effects are often short-lived, they reveal how sensitive we are to environmental signals. In everyday life, priming can be positive, inspiring productivity, kindness, or creativity, but it also shows how easily our minds can be guided without our awareness. Every environment we enter quietly sets the stage for how we think and act. Kindness can strengthen your immune system. Acts of kindness do not only make other people feel good, but can also benefit your health. Helping others has been linked to lower blood pressure, reduced stress hormones, and improved immune function. Psychologists suggest that this may be partly due to the release of oxytocin, which promotes feelings of warmth and trust while supporting cardiovascular health. Even small gestures, such as holding a door open or offering a smile, can create these effects. Over time, kindness can become a virtuous cycle. Doing good increases well-being, which in turn makes people more likely to continue helping. In this way, kindness is not only a form of social glue, but also a quiet form of self-care woven into the exchanges that connect us to one another. Your posture can influence your mood. The way you hold your body can shape the way you feel. Standing or sitting upright can increase feelings of confidence and alertness, while slouching can reinforce fatigue or a low mood. This connection works through feedback loops between the body and the brain. Posture influences hormone levels, breathing patterns, and neural activity. In one study, participants who adopted power poses reported a greater sense of control, although the exact effects remain debated. Beyond confidence, posture can also affect energy levels by opening or restricting the chest and diaphragm. Small adjustments, such as sitting up straight, relaxing your shoulders, and lifting your head, can subtly move the mind toward greater clarity and presence. In many ways, the body sets the stage for the story the mind tells itself. Trauma can sometimes lead to personal growth. Although trauma can cause profound pain, some people emerge from it with greater resilience, empathy, or a renewed sense of purpose, a phenomenon known as post-traumatic growth. This does not mean that the trauma was beneficial, but rather that the recovery process can sometimes foster strengths that might not otherwise have developed. Psychologists have identified areas of growth such as stronger relationships, a greater appreciation for life, and a deeper connection with personal values. The process often involves searching for meaning and finding ways to integrate the experience into a broader life narrative. Although not everyone experiences post-traumatic growth, those who do often describe it as a transformation forged through hardship, like a tree growing stronger after surviving a storm. Stress can spread between people without words. Stress can be contagious, passing silently from one person to another. Simply observing someone's tense body language or facial expressions, or hearing changes in their voice, can trigger a mirrored stress response in the observer's brain. This social transmission of stress is believed to be rooted in empathy. Our nervous systems become attuned to the states of those around us. Although this can help groups respond collectively to threats, it also means that one person's anxiety can spread outward, affecting the atmosphere of an entire room. The opposite is also true. Calmness can spread in the same way, easing tension and encouraging steadiness. In this sense, managing our own stress is not only an act of self-care, but also a quiet gift to those around us. We are more likely to help when we are the only witnesses. When we are alone and see someone in need, we tend to act quickly because there is no one else to whom we can pass the responsibility. This contrasts with the bystander effect, which can occur in groups when people hesitate, assuming that someone else will step forward. Being the only witness removes that uncertainty, placing the decision directly in our hands. In those moments, the impulse to help often feels immediate and personal. Psychologists suggest that this reflects an ancient survival strategy. In small groups, the contribution of every member was essential. Today, it serves as a reminder that sometimes the smallest and most immediate actions can make the greatest difference, especially when no one else is nearby to take the first step. Mirroring someone's movements can create an instant sense of empathy. Subtly matching another person's gestures, posture, or speech patterns can create a feeling of connection and trust. This unconscious tendency, known as the chameleon effect, is part of our social nature. When it happens naturally, mirroring communicates empathy and attention, making the other person feel understood. It is why conversations often become synchronized in rhythm, or why friends may find themselves laughing or leaning forward at the same time. In professional settings, skilled negotiators sometimes use mirroring to encourage cooperation, while therapists use it to strengthen rapport. However, when it is forced or exaggerated, it can feel insincere. In its truest form, mirroring is simply the body's way of saying, "I am with you." A silent alignment of two nervous systems moving at the same time, like dancers following the same music. Changing your study location can improve memory retention. Studying in different environments can help information become more firmly stored in memory. This effect occurs because each location provides unique cues that the brain unconsciously associates with the material being learned. When you later recall the information, you have a richer network of associations from which to retrieve it. For example, alternating between a quiet room, a park bench, and a library can create subtle differences in lighting, background noise, and sense, all of which become retrieval cues. Psychologists suggest that this technique can be especially useful when preparing for exams or presentations. The same principle extends beyond studying. Practicing a skill in a variety of settings can improve adaptability and performance. By gently changing your routine, you give your brain more threads to weave into memory, creating a tapestry that is much harder to unravel. Teaching others strengthens your own understanding. Explaining a concept to someone else requires organizing your thoughts, finding clear language, and anticipating questions, all of which deepen your understanding of the material. This is sometimes called the protégé effect, and it is one reason teachers often say they learn as much as they teach. When you teach, you actively retrieve and reconstruct knowledge, strengthening the neural pathways that store it. Even preparing to teach can improve retention because your brain engages with the information in a more structured and intentional way. This approach works for both skills and facts. Showing a friend how to cook a dish, for example, reinforces your own procedural memory. In a way, teaching transforms knowledge from something you possess into something you live, making it a more permanent part of the library of your mind. Some fears are inherited through evolution. Certain fears, such as fear of snakes, spiders, or heights, develop more readily in humans and other primates, even without direct negative experiences. Psychologists and evolutionary biologists believe these fears are evolutionarily prepared, giving our ancestors an advantage in avoiding danger. Studies have shown that people develop fear responses to these stimuli more quickly than to neutral objects such as flowers or houses. Although modern life has made many of these dangers less relevant, the underlying predisposition remains. This evolutionary inheritance means that our emotional responses are shaped not only by personal experience, but also by the long history of survival encoded within our nervous systems. In some cases, our instincts are whispers from a past where a single second of caution could mean the difference between life and death. Multitasking reduces the quality of your memory. Switching between tasks may feel productive, but it often comes at the expense of memory accuracy. When attention is divided, the brain cannot fully encode the details of each task, resulting in weaker recall. Multitasking also increases the likelihood of source confusion, where you remember information but forget where it came from. Over time, habitual multitasking may train the brain to favor breadth over depth, making sustained focus more difficult. Psychologists recommend single tasking, dedicating time to one activity at a time for better learning and retention. Although our modern environment constantly tempts us to do many things at once, the mind is at its sharpest when it is allowed to dive deeply into a single thread, weaving it securely into memory. Your sense of time can stretch or collapse in different situations. Time perception is fluid, shaped by attention, emotion, and novelty. Moments of danger or intense focus can seem longer as the brain records more sensory details each second. In contrast, familiar routines can appear to vanish quickly, with hours passing in what feels like minutes. This effect helps explain why childhood often seems to stretch on endlessly. Every experience is new, whereas adulthood can seem to pass more quickly as novelty declines. Psychologists suggest that deliberately seeking new experiences can slow the perceived passage of time, adding richness to each day. In this way, our sense of time is less like a clock and more like an accordion, expanding and contracting with the music of our experiences. Some memories can be erased through targeted disruption. Researchers have found ways to weaken or even erase specific memories in animals by interrupting the reconsolidation process, the period during which a memory is recalled and then stored again. Although this approach remains largely experimental in humans, it has been explored as a potential treatment for traumatic memories. By interfering with the brain's chemical pathways during reconsolidation, scientists can make certain memories less vivid or less emotionally charged. This possibility raises both hope and ethical questions. Could erasing pain also erase important parts of a person's identity? For now, the research reminds us that memory is not a fixed recording, but a living and changing construction that, under certain circumstances, can be rewritten. Your brain can create false memories that feel completely real. False memories are not merely blurry recollections. They can feel just as vivid and detailed as genuine ones. Experiments have shown that suggestion, imagination, and even photographs can lead people to remember events that never happened. The brain constructs memories by rebuilding details each time they are recalled, which means they can subtly change over time. This flexibility is usually helpful because it allows memories to adapt, but it also leaves them vulnerable to distortion. In some cases, people may confidently remember entire scenarios that are completely fictional, complete with emotions and sensory impressions. It is a reminder that memory is not a perfect archive, but a story told by the mind. And like any story, it can change each time it is told. Your brain can fill in gaps in your vision without you realizing it. We all have a blind spot where the optic nerve connects to the retina, yet we rarely notice it. This is because the brain automatically fills in the missing information by using surrounding details and patterns. This filling in process happens constantly, not only at the blind spot, smoothing over small gaps in vision caused by blinking, shadows, or obstructions. Most of the time the result is seamless, but it means that what we see is partly a construction rather than a direct capture of reality. In this way, the brain acts like an editor, presenting a polished version of the world instead of the raw footage. We live within an image shaped as much by interpretation as by light. Hearing your own name triggers a unique response in the brain. Your name is like a personal alarm for your brain. Even in a noisy room, hearing your name can cut through the surrounding sounds and immediately capture your attention. This is known as the cocktail party effect. Brain scans show that hearing your own name triggers increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, an area associated with self-awareness. The response is automatic and often emotional because names are deeply connected to identity and social connection. This sensitivity likely evolved because recognizing when someone was addressing you could mean safety, opportunity, or vital information. Even when whispered from across a room, your name has the power to break through distractions and bring you back to the present moment. It is like a small thread connecting you to the world around you. People can develop biases without realizing it. Biases are not always deliberate or conscious. The brain's tendency to form rapid impressions and categorize information can lead to implicit biases, automatic preferences, or associations that operate below conscious awareness. These biases can influence decisions, perceptions, and interactions even in people who genuinely value fairness and equality. Tests of implicit bias reveal that such associations can be surprisingly resistant to change, but awareness is the first step toward reducing their influence. By slowing down decisions, seeking diverse perspectives, and questioning instinctive reactions, we can begin to challenge these hidden patterns. This process does not erase bias entirely, but it can weaken its influence, allowing our actions to better reflect our conscious values. In a way, it is like learning to recognize an unseen current beneath the surface. Once you know it is there, you can choose how to navigate it. Peer pressure can shape opinions without evidence. Human beings are deeply social, and our opinions can be influenced simply by the views of those around us. In classic experiments, participants were willing to give obviously incorrect answers to simple questions when everyone else in the group did the same, a phenomenon known as conformity. This pull toward agreement can become even stronger when the group is unanimous or when we feel uncertain. Conformity is not always negative because it can promote cooperation and shared norms, but it can also lead us to ignore our own judgment in favor of the crowd. Being aware of this tendency can help us pause, examine the evidence, and ask ourselves whether agreement is genuine or simply a desire to fit in. Sometimes the quietest act of independence is remaining faithful to the truth when every voice around you says otherwise. Sleep can generate ideas you could not reach while awake. While the body rests, the brain continues working, reorganizing memories, making connections, and even solving problems. That is why answers sometimes appear in dreams, or a solution feels obvious in the morning after seeming impossible the night before. During certain stages of sleep, the brain has greater freedom to explore unusual associations that are not constrained by waking logic. Artists, scientists, and inventors have credited sleep with some of their greatest discoveries. This creative problem-solving occurs because the sleeping brain combines information in novel ways, finding patterns that the waking mind might overlook. It is a reminder that rest is not inactivity, but an active state in which the mind quietly works behind the scenes, ready to surprise us with sudden clarity when a new day begins. Teaching others strengthens your memory. When you teach something you have learned, you practice active recall, forcing the brain to retrieve and organize information. This process strengthens memory pathways, making knowledge more durable. The act of explaining also reveals gaps in understanding, encouraging deeper learning. Even informal teaching, such as telling a friend about a documentary you watched, can reinforce memory. Psychologists call this the protégé effect, and it is one reason teachers, tutors, and coaches often master their subjects so thoroughly. By teaching, you transform passive knowledge into an active skill, integrating it more firmly into your mental framework. The more you explain, the more the information becomes a part of you. Doodling can help you stay focused. Far from being a sign of distraction, doodling can support concentration. In one study, participants who doodled while listening to a boring audio recording remembered more details than those who did not. The gentle activity of doodling may prevent the mind from wandering completely, keeping it anchored to the task at hand. This effect works because the brain has a limited capacity for attention. A small, repetitive activity can occupy unused mental space without taking attention away from the main task. For some people, doodling during lectures or meetings is like maintaining a gentle link between their scattered thoughts and the information in front of them. In the quiet strokes of a pencil, attention finds its rhythm. Smiling can trick your brain into feeling happier. The simple act of smiling, even when it is not caused by joy, can activate brain pathways that release mood-enhancing chemicals such as dopamine and serotonin. This is the facial feedback hypothesis in action. Our expressions influence our emotions just as our emotions influence our expressions. In several experiments, people who were asked to hold a pencil between their teeth, forcing a smile, reported finding jokes funnier than those who frowned. Although a smile cannot erase stress or sadness, it can create a small positive shift in emotional state, making challenges easier to face. It is a reminder that the body and mind are in constant conversation, and sometimes the body can speak first. Flavor is shaped more by smell than by the tongue. What we call taste is largely a combination of flavor and aroma. The tongue can detect only 5 basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. In contrast, the thousands of subtle flavors we perceive come from the sense of smell. When you eat with your nose blocked, food often seems bland because those aromatic signals are missing. The brain merges taste and smell into a single experience, processing them together in regions connected to memory and emotion. That is why certain flavors can instantly transport you to a specific moment or place. With every bite, the senses work together to create something richer than either one could achieve alone. Spacing out your learning helps you remember for longer. Instead of studying everything at once, spreading learning across multiple sessions, known as the spacing effect, leads to better long-term retention. This works because each review reinforces the memory, while the time between sessions allows enough forgetting to occur that retrieval requires effort. That effort is what strengthens the neural pathways, making the memory more durable. Whether you are studying a language, practicing music, or learning names, spacing out practice sessions can help knowledge remain for months or years instead of days. It is the difference between writing in wet sand and carving into stone. Your brain can make a decision before you realize it. Experiments using brain imaging have found that neural activity can predict a decision seconds before a person becomes consciously aware of making it. This suggests that much of what we consider a choice begins in unconscious processes, while consciousness arrives slightly later to claim authorship. Although this does not mean that free will is an illusion, it does reveal that conscious awareness is only one part of a much larger decision-making system. The mind works like a deep ocean, where the surface waves of conscious thought are shaped by invisible currents far below. Some minds automatically connect sounds with colors. For people with a form of synesthesia, certain sounds can trigger the perception of colors. A musical note may appear as a burst of blue, or a spoken word may carry a soft haze of green. These color associations are consistent for each person and often appear at an early age. Neuroscientists believe this blending of the senses occurs because of greater connectivity between brain regions that normally process sound and vision separately. Although synesthesia is uncommon, it offers a glimpse into the brain's remarkable flexibility and its ability to create rich, complex experiences from the world around us. For those who experience it, music is not only heard but also seen, like watching a silent fireworks display with every chord and melody. People remember gossip better than objective facts. Stories about other people's behavior, whether positive or negative, tend to remain in memory longer than neutral information. This bias may come from evolution, when tracking reputations and social alliances was crucial for survival. Knowing who could be trusted, who might pose a threat, and who contributed to the group provided a real advantage. Even today, gossip activates the brain's social reasoning networks, making it more memorable. Although gossip can be harmful when it is false or malicious, it can also serve as a form of informal social regulation that reinforces group norms. Its persistence in memory is a reminder of how deeply wired we are for social awareness and how the stories we pass along can shape the invisible threads that connect us. Changing your perspective can reduce stress. Reframing a stressful situation and viewing it from a different angle can reduce its emotional weight. Psychologists call this cognitive reappraisal, and it works by changing the meaning we assign to an event. For example, seeing a challenge as an opportunity for growth rather than as a threat can reduce anxiety and improve problem solving. Brain scans show that reappraisal activates the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate the amygdala, the brain's fear center. This shift does not erase the difficulty, but it can create space between the stimulus and the reaction, allowing for a calmer and more deliberate response. Over time, the habit of reappraisal can make the mind more resilient, transforming stress into a teacher instead of an enemy. People can be more creative when they are slightly tired. It may seem contradictory, but a mildly tired brain can sometimes think more creatively than one that is fully alert. When we are a little fatigued, our mental filters loosen, allowing more unusual connections to emerge. This can be especially useful for tasks that require divergent thinking, brainstorming, invention, or unconventional problem solving. Psychologists suggest that the relaxed control of a tired mind can free it from rigid patterns, opening the door to novel ideas. Of course, exhaustion makes most types of work more difficult, but at the ideal point between alertness and tiredness, the mind may wander just far enough to stumble upon unexpected brilliance. It is one reason some people discover their most original ideas late at night or early in the morning when thoughts flow a little more freely. People adjust their opinions to align with a group. Group consensus can be a powerful force that often pushes people to adopt positions they might not hold individually. This is a form of conformity in which the desire for social harmony overrides personal judgment. Classic studies have shown that people will accept a group's incorrect answer to an obvious question simply to avoid standing out. Although conformity can promote cooperation and cohesion, it can also suppress creativity and dissent. Recognizing the pull of group opinion allows us to pause and consider whether agreement reflects our own beliefs or the influence of the group. In a world filled with collective voices, the quietest and often most important voice we need to hear is our own. Compliments activate the same brain regions as rewards. Receiving a compliment can light up the brain's reward centers in much the same way as receiving money or winning a prize. Areas such as the striatum respond to social praise, releasing dopamine and encouraging positive emotions. Compliments can also improve performance because encouragement increases motivation and confidence. This is why positive feedback is such a powerful tool in teaching, teamwork, and relationships. The effect is not limited to elaborate praise, because even small and sincere expressions of recognition can trigger this response. At its core, a compliment is both recognition and connection, a way of telling someone that they are seen and valued in a moment that may resonate far beyond the words themselves. Your brain can imagine pain you have never felt. The mind's ability to simulate experiences extends even to sensations we have never personally endured. Simply watching someone in pain or reading a vivid description can activate areas of the brain involved in processing our own pain. This ability likely evolved to strengthen empathy, helping us avoid danger and understand the suffering of others. Although imagined pain is not as intense as real pain, the overlap in brain activity can be powerful enough to make us wince at another person's injury. This simulation also means that fear and anxiety can arise from anticipated pain, influencing our choices even before any real harm occurs. Lack of sleep prevents new memories from forming. Sleep deprivation can severely impair the brain's ability to store new information. During deep sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, the hippocampus works to consolidate memories, transferring them into long-term storage. Without enough rest, this process is disrupted, leaving the mind unable to retain the details of the day. Even a single night of poor sleep can weaken learning and memory, while chronic sleep deprivation may lead to more lasting cognitive decline over time. This is why rest is essential, not only for health, but also for growth. Without it, the stories of our days fade before they can be written into memory. People often believe information simply because it is repeated. The illusory truth effect describes our tendency to accept statements as true when we hear them often enough, regardless of their accuracy. Repetition increases familiarity, and familiarity feels like truth to the brain. This mental shortcut evolved to help us learn from patterns, but in the modern world, it can be exploited by misinformation. Becoming aware of this bias allows us to slow down and verify facts before accepting repeated claims. In a noisy information environment, the mind's comfort with what feels familiar can be both a strength and a vulnerability. Brain processes faces in a special way. Faces are so important to human interaction that the brain dedicates specialized regions to recognizing and interpreting them. The fusiform face area, located in the temporal lobe, allows us to identify people quickly, read emotions, and detect subtle changes in expression. This system is so efficient that we often recognize a face faster than we can remember a name. It is also one reason we sometimes see faces in clouds or patterns. The brain is prepared to find them everywhere. The importance of this ability reflects our evolutionary history, when reading faces was essential for communication and survival. Anticipation often feels better than the event itself. The joy of looking forward to something, such as a trip, a vacation, or a long-awaited reunion, can sometimes exceed the pleasure of the event itself. Psychologists call this the anticipation effect, and it occurs because imagining the future allows the mind to create an ideal version free from the unpredictability of reality. Anticipation can improve mood, increase motivation, and even reduce stress during the days before an event. When the moment finally arrives, it may not match the vivid image we created, but that does not diminish the value of looking forward to it. In a way, anticipation is its own reward, a slow and sweet unfolding in the mind that extends happiness through time, allowing us to enjoy not only what is, but also what could be. We judge faces in less than the blink of an eye. A single glance is enough for the brain to form an impression of a face, sometimes in less than 100 milliseconds. This ultra-fast evaluation involves the amygdala and other areas responsible for processing social signals, assessing trustworthiness, and recognizing familiarity. These judgments often feel intuitive because they bypass deliberate reasoning, appearing as a gut feeling rather than a conscious thought. Although instant judgments can be useful for detecting danger or recognizing friends, they can also be distorted by bias. Awareness of this speed can help us pause, giving slower and more thoughtful impressions a chance to form. In the span of a blink, the mind draws a portrait, but it is only the first draft. Scents can influence your mood without you realizing it. The connection between scent and emotion is immediate and often unconscious. Smells travel directly to the limbic system, bypassing the brain's rational processing centers. This means that a faint floral fragrance, a trace of wood smoke, or the smell of fresh bread can alter your mood before you become aware of it. Relaxing scents such as lavender may lower heart rate and promote calm, while stronger scents such as citrus may increase alertness. These effects are subtle but powerful, shaping the emotional background of a moment. Whether in nature, at home, or on a crowded street, the air carries invisible signals that the brain translates into feelings, a quiet influence on the climate of the mind. Hearing certain sounds can trigger physical reactions. A gentle melody can slow your breathing, while a sudden loud noise can accelerate your heart rate. Sound is processed not only by the auditory system, but also by brain regions connected to emotion, memory, and movement. Certain frequencies can create tingling sensations, as in autonomous sensory meridian response, while others can cause discomfort or tension. These physical reactions are part of an ancient survival system. Rapid responses to auditory signals could mean the difference between safety and danger. In modern life, they remain a reminder of how deeply sound is connected to the body's rhythms. Music, voices, and even background noise can leave subtle traces on our physical state. Your mind works differently when you solve problems alone. When working individually, people often engage in deeper and more reflective thinking, free from the influence of other people's opinions. This can lead to more original solutions. Although solitary work may lack the stimulation and feedback of group collaboration, brain activity during individual problem solving often shows greater activation in areas associated with introspection and internal visualization. Working alone allows for unfiltered creativity, but it also requires self-discipline to remain focused. In contrast, group settings can increase energy and the exchange of ideas, but they also risk falling into conformity. Knowing when to seek solitude and when to collaborate can help us use the strengths of both approaches. People remember emotionally intense moments more clearly. Emotion acts like a spotlight on memory, sharpening details and strengthening recall. Whether the moment is joyful, frightening, or sorrowful, increased emotional activation causes the amygdala to signal the hippocampus, giving the event priority for long-term storage. This is why we can remember where we were and how we felt during important life events, even decades later. Although emotion improves memory for central details, it can sometimes blur peripheral ones. The feeling remains clear, but the exact sequence of events may fade. These memories become part of the emotional fabric of our lives, moments when the heart and mind worked together to ensure that they would not be forgotten. People are more persuasive when they mirror the movements of others. Subtly imitating gestures, posture, and expressions can increase persuasion and empathy. This nonverbal mirroring signals attention and emotional alignment, often without either person being aware of it. In negotiations, sales, and even casual conversations, mirroring another person can make them feel more understood, increasing their openness to ideas. The effect works best when it is natural and discreet, because forced imitation can seem manipulative. In its most genuine form, mirroring is simply an expression of empathy, a silent conversation between bodies that strengthens the spoken word. Your brain can restructure itself throughout your entire life. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to adapt and modify its structure in response to learning, experience, and injury. New connections form between neurons, while existing pathways can strengthen or weaken depending on how often they are used. This adaptability is greatest during childhood, but it continues into old age, allowing recovery after strokes, the acquisition of new skills, and the ability to reshape habits. Every new experience, from meeting someone to practicing a craft, subtly alters the brain's architecture. In a very real sense, we are the sculptors of our own minds. Our perception of time changes under extreme emotions. Moments of fear, excitement, or awe can distort the way time feels. Under stress, the brain processes more sensory information, making a moment seem longer in retrospect. In contrast, intense joy or deep concentration can make hours seem to disappear in an instant. This elasticity in time perception reflects the brain's adaptive responses to important events, ensuring that crucial moments are noticed and remembered. That is why a few seconds of danger can feel like minutes, while a night filled with laughter can vanish in a heartbeat. Brain can change the intensity of pain depending on the context. Pain does not depend only on the severity of an injury. The brain constantly evaluates the situation before deciding how much importance to give a painful signal. In emergencies, some people continue running or fighting without noticing serious injuries until several minutes later. Once the danger has passed, the brain reduces the release of substances that were blocking the pain, and the sensation appears at full intensity. In the same way, feeling safe, supported, or protected can reduce the perception of pain even when the injury remains unchanged. This shows that pain is not simply a signal traveling from the body to the brain, but an experience constructed by the nervous system to increase the chances of survival. Before allowing suffering to take over our full attention, the brain first tries to answer the most important question: do you still need all your strength to survive? Your brain begins preparing a response before the other person finishes speaking. During a conversation, the brain does not wait patiently to hear the final word before building a reply. While the other person is still speaking, different regions associated with language are already predicting how the sentence will end and preparing possible responses. This anticipation allows conversations to flow quickly and makes the pauses between speakers surprisingly short. However, it can also cause misunderstandings when the brain believes it has understood the message too soon. Sometimes we respond to an idea we imagined instead of responding to what was actually said. Listening carefully means temporarily silencing that need to anticipate and allowing the message to arrive in full. Only then does a conversation stop being an exchange of predictions and become a genuine meeting between two minds. Expectations can change the taste of the same food. Two people can try exactly the same product and describe completely different flavors depending on what they expected to experience. In numerous experiments, changing only the color of the packaging, the price, or the description of a food alters how its flavor is perceived. A wine presented as expensive often seems more complex than the same wine labeled as inexpensive. The brain combines signals from the tongue with visual information, memory, and expectations to build the final experience. Eating is never only a matter of taste buds. Every bite is accompanied by a story that the brain began writing before the food ever touched the tongue. Many times, we taste our expectations just as much as the food itself. Curiosity helps the brain remember even unrelated information. When we feel genuine curiosity about an answer, the brain enters a special state of learning. During this period, activity increases in regions associated with motivation and memory, making it easier to remember not only what we wanted to discover, but also completely different information presented shortly afterward. It is as though curiosity temporarily opens a window in which learning becomes more efficient. Researchers believe this mechanism evolved to take advantage of moments when discovering new information could be especially valuable for survival. Every question that awakens genuine interest quietly prepares the brain to absorb far more knowledge than we initially intended to seek. Your brain automatically distinguishes a familiar voice from hundreds of unfamiliar ones. Even when a room is filled with simultaneous conversations, hearing the voice of someone close to you can immediately capture your attention. The brain builds a highly precise representation of familiar voices, storing features such as tone, rhythm, pronunciation, and even small pauses in speech. This allows it to identify relatives, friends, or coworkers quickly without needing to see them. This ability probably evolved because recognizing the voice of a group member provided important advantages in noisy environments or places with limited visibility. Over time, every familiar voice becomes a kind of sound signature that the brain can locate even within the most chaotic noise. Intense emotions can make time seem to stop without the clock changing. Many people describe accidents or dangerous moments as though everything were happening in slow motion. However, research suggests that the brain does not actually process the passage of time more quickly. Instead, it records an enormous number of details because of intense emotional activation. When the moment is remembered later, the large amount of stored information makes it seem as though it lasted much longer than it actually did. Memory creates the illusion of expanded time. It is as though the brain increases the resolution of the experience, producing a memory so rich that our later perception assumes it must have lasted several additional seconds. Sleeping after learning strengthens memories more than continuing to study without rest. Many people believe the best way to learn is to study for hours without stopping, but the brain needs periods of rest to consolidate information. During sleep, especially during certain deep stages, the hippocampus replays patterns of activity related to what was learned during the day, helping transfer those memories into more stable networks distributed throughout the cerebral cortex. It is a kind of silent repetition that occurs while we remain unconscious. For this reason, sleeping properly after studying usually produces better results than extending a study session by sacrificing hours of rest. While the mind appears to be completely disconnected, it continues organizing knowledge with an efficiency that no additional study session can match. Your brain automatically detects when a smile is genuine. Not all smiles activate the same brain regions in the people who observe them. Genuine smiles involve the muscles around the eyes as well as the lips, producing small signals that the human brain learns to recognize from a very early age. Even when we cannot consciously explain why one smile seems sincere and another seems forced, our social system can often distinguish between them with considerable accuracy. This ability helps us evaluate other people's intentions and supports relationships built on trust. Throughout evolution, detecting authentic expressions may have meant the difference between a reliable ally and someone pretending to cooperate. Today, we continue using this ability thousands of times each day without even noticing that our brain is performing the analysis. Solving a difficult problem can activate a reward response comparable to receiving a prize. When we finally find the solution to a complicated puzzle or understand an idea that once seemed impossible, the brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and learning. This chemical reward strengthens the neural connections involved in the problem-solving process and increases the likelihood that we will seek similar challenges in the future. Scientists believe this mechanism encouraged innovation throughout human evolution by rewarding the ability to find new solutions to complex problems. The satisfaction that appears after understanding something difficult is not merely a pleasant emotion. It is a biological tool designed to drive curiosity and constant discovery. Silence also changes the activity of your brain. Although we often think that the brain responds only to sound, moments of silence have their own effects on how it functions. Some studies suggest that brief periods of complete silence support the reorganization of neural networks associated with attention and memory. After continuous exposure to noise, silence can act as a pause that allows the nervous system to recover some of its resources. It also helps the mind process recent information without new distractions. In a world where sound seems to follow us constantly, a few minutes of genuine silence can become an opportunity for the brain to quietly reorganize its activity before facing the endless flow of stimulation again. Your brain can detect grammatical errors before you become consciously aware of them. While you read or listen to a sentence, Different brain regions continuously analyze its structure without requiring you to think about the rules of language. When a word appears out of place or an unexpected construction occurs, the brain produces a measurable electrical response only a fraction of a second later. Interestingly, this reaction can happen even before a person is consciously able to identify the error. The language system works like an extremely sophisticated automatic proofreader, built through years of exposure to a native language. Thanks to this mechanism, we can maintain fast conversations without deliberately analyzing every word. Long before the conscious mind intervenes, the brain is already quietly checking that everything fits within the expected structure of language. New experiences can make the same year feel much longer in memory. Two people can live through exactly 365 days and yet remember that year in completely different ways. When routine dominates most of the time, the brain stores fewer distinct memories, and looking back, that period seems to have passed quickly. In contrast, years filled with travel, learning, change, or new experiences create a greater number of unique memories, making them seem much longer in retrospect. This is why many people feel that childhood seemed endless, while adulthood appears to speed by. It is not that time actually passes more quickly, but that the brain records fewer memorable milestones. Filling your life with small new experiences can change the way you experience the passage of years long after they have ended. The brain detects patterns even when they do not actually exist. The human mind evolved to find relationships between events because recognizing patterns increased the chances of survival. Detecting tracks, interpreting changes in the weather, or identifying suspicious movements could mean the difference between life and death. However, this remarkable ability also has a side effect. Sometimes we find connections where only chance exists. We may see familiar shapes in the clouds, faces in inanimate objects, or believe that two unrelated events are connected simply because they happened close together in time. Psychologists call this tendency apophenia. Although it sometimes leads to incorrect conclusions, it also forms the foundation of creativity, science, and discovery. The same brain that can imagine non-existent connections is also the one that finds the real connections that transform our understanding of the world. Slow breathing can directly change your brain's activity. Breathing does more than keep the body alive. The rhythm of your breathing continuously sends signals to the brain that influence attention, emotions, and alertness. When we breathe slowly and deeply, activity in the parasympathetic nervous system increases, promoting relaxation and reducing the body's physiological response to stress. At the same time, certain brain regions involved in emotional regulation show measurable changes in activity. This connection explains why many stress management techniques, meditation practices, and athletic training programs begin by focusing on breathing. Although it may seem like a completely automatic action, consciously changing your breathing rhythm can become one of the most direct ways to influence the way your brain functions. Your brain remembers information better when you explain it in your own words. Reading the same text over and over creates a feeling of familiarity that can easily be mistaken for learning. However, research shows that trying to explain an idea using your own words strengthens memory much more effectively. By doing so, the brain reorganizes information, identifies gaps in understanding, and builds stronger connections between different pieces of knowledge. This process requires more effort than simply rereading, but that additional difficulty is precisely what promotes longer-lasting learning. It is like rebuilding a structure using its individual pieces instead of merely looking at it from the outside. Every explanation forces the mind to test whether it truly understands what it believes it has learned. People can unconsciously synchronize their walking pace when walking together. When two people walk the same path for several minutes, their footsteps often begin to match without either person consciously deciding to do so. The brain uses visual, auditory, and motor information to adjust movement to those around us. This synchronization also appears during dancing, sports, military marches, and even long conversations in which people eventually begin moving their hands with similar rhythms. Scientists believe this ability promoted cooperation within human groups by making collective activities more efficient. Walking at the same pace may seem like an insignificant detail, but it reflects the remarkable ease with which our nervous systems begin coordinating whenever we share an experience. Brain pays more attention to the unexpected than to the familiar. Every second we receive an enormous amount of sensory information, but the brain cannot process all of it with the same level of detail. Instead, it builds predictions about what is likely to happen next. When reality matches those expectations, it devotes very few resources to analyzing it. But when something unexpected appears, such as an unusual sound or an object in an unfamiliar place, brain activity immediately increases. That surprise signals that the brain's internal model of the world needs updating. Thanks to this mechanism, we quickly notice important changes in our surroundings without wasting energy analyzing what remains the same. Surprise does more than capture our attention. It also helps the brain learn. Imagining a movement activates many of the same brain regions as actually performing it. When a pianist imagines playing a melody or an athlete visualizes a competition, many areas involved in movement display patterns of activity similar to those produced during the actual action. Although the muscles barely contract, the brain rehearses the motor sequence internally. This ability explains why mental practice can complement physical training in certain situations. Imagined movements help strengthen motor planning and make later execution easier. The brain appears to use these simulations as a kind of silent rehearsal where it can practice without expending energy or taking physical risks. Before every successful movement, there is often an invisible version that has already taken place within the mind. Your brain automatically adjusts the brightness of the world based on what it expects to find. Walking from a sunny street into a dark room or stepping back outside causes rapid visual adaptation. However, the brain does not simply wait for the eyes to adjust. It also uses previous experience to anticipate how much light should exist in each environment. Thanks to this combination of sensory information and expectations, we can continue recognizing objects even while lighting conditions change dramatically. Without this system, every transition between bright and dark environments would feel much slower and more confusing. What we see depends not only on the amount of light entering our eyes, but also on the brain's constant interpretation of how the world should appear. Short breaks improve the ability to solve complex problems. Many people have experienced finding a solution immediately after stepping away from a difficult problem. This happens because while conscious attention shifts to another activity, different brain networks continue reorganizing information in the background. During that time, new connections can form between ideas that were previously separate, leading to what are often called moments of insight. Stepping away from a difficult task for a few minutes does not mean abandoning the problem. In many cases, it allows the brain to keep working quietly without the constant pressure of conscious attention. The answer that once seemed impossible may have been taking shape the entire time, simply waiting for the right moment to emerge. Important decisions are often made a few seconds before you become aware of them. Numerous experiments have shown that certain brain regions begin preparing for a choice before a person consciously experiences the feeling of having made a decision. In studies where participants were asked to press a button whenever they wished, the brain activity associated with that action appeared moments before they reported making the decision. This finding does not mean that free will has disappeared, because its interpretation remains the subject of intense debate among neuroscientists and philosophers. What it does reveal is that consciousness does not always initiate our decisions. Instead, it sometimes seems to join the process after it has already begun. Beneath the surface of every conscious thought, the brain maintains intense activity, preparing actions, evaluating possibilities, and organizing responses long before we feel that we have made a choice. The brain learns best when it makes small mistakes during the learning process. Making mistakes can be frustrating, but it is also one of the most effective ways to learn. When the brain predicts an outcome and reality proves it wrong, it generates a signal known as a prediction error. The difference between what was expected and what actually happened drives changes in neural connections that improve future performance. If a task is too easy, the brain has little need to adapt. If it is far too difficult, it may give up altogether. The most effective learning usually happens when mistakes are small enough to correct but frequent enough to force the nervous system to keep adjusting. Every well-used mistake represents an opportunity for the brain to quietly refine its internal models of the world. Listening to a story activates many more brain regions than listening to isolated facts. When we receive only a list of facts, The brain mainly processes information related to language and memory. However, when those same facts become part of a story, regions associated with emotion, imagination, movement, and even sensory perception also become active. If someone describes the scent of a forest or the sound of a storm, areas specialized in processing those stimuli may respond as though we were partially experiencing them ourselves. This widespread activation makes stories far more memorable than information presented in isolation. Since ancient times, storytelling has allowed complex knowledge to pass from one generation to the next by taking advantage of the brain's extraordinary ability to remember what comes to life within a story. Your brain can recognize a lie even when you cannot explain why you feel suspicious. Sometimes we meet someone and sense that something does not fit, even when we cannot identify a specific detail. This happens because the brain simultaneously analyzes an enormous number of subtle signals, including facial expressions, pauses in speech, changes in tone, body movements, and consistency between different behaviors. Although none of these signals can identify a lie with certainty on its own, the nervous system may detect inconsistencies before they reach conscious awareness. That intuitive feeling of distrust often appears when several weak clues point in the same direction. However, intuition is not infallible and can also be wrong. Even so, it shows how extensively the brain processes social information beyond what we are able to describe consciously. Simply expecting a reward can temporarily improve your ability to learn. Receiving a reward is not the only thing that changes the brain. Expecting one also changes the way we pay attention and store information. When we anticipate a positive outcome, dopamine release increases in circuits associated with motivation. This change helps the brain devote more resources to processing what it considers important at that moment. Interestingly, learning improves even before the reward is received. It is as though the nervous system prepares the ground in advance, convinced that what is happening deserves to be remembered. This mechanism probably evolved to support learning in situations where discovering new resources or solving problems could provide immediate survival benefits. Your brain can complete words before you finish reading them. As you move through a sentence, the brain does not interpret every letter completely independently. It uses context, previous experience, and the probabilities of language to anticipate what the next word will be. Thanks to this ability, we can read very quickly even when some letters are switched or part of a word is missing. The brain automatically fills in the gaps using its best predictions. This skill speeds up comprehension, although it also explains why we sometimes overlook obvious spelling mistakes during proofreading. We do not see only what is written. We also see what the brain expected to find. Memories change slightly every time you retrieve them. Remembering an event is not simply a matter of opening an untouched file inside the brain. Each time a memory returns to conscious awareness, it temporarily enters a flexible state before being stored again. During that brief process, it may gain new details, lose others, or blend with more recent information. This phenomenon, known as memory reconsolidation, explains why some memories evolve over time, even when we believe we remember them exactly the same way. Memory works more like a painting that receives small touch-ups each time we look at it than like an unchanging photograph. Every act of recall leaves a new trace over the previous one, keeping our personal history slightly alive and constantly changing. Uncertainty can hold your attention much longer than certainty. When the outcome of a situation remains uncertain, the brain continues assigning resources to it because it still believes valuable information may be gained. This is one reason mysteries, puzzles, and stories with open endings can be so absorbing. As long as a question remains unanswered, networks associated with attention and motivation stay active, searching for a solution. Once the uncertainty disappears, that activation usually drops quickly. The brain is designed to reduce uncertainty in the environment because, throughout much of evolution, knowing the correct answer could mean finding food, avoiding danger, or choosing the best path. Unanswered questions exert such a powerful pull precisely because the mind dislikes leaving matters unresolved. Watching someone else learn also activates your own learning systems. Observing another person practice a skill is not a passive experience for the brain. Research shows that watching movements, strategies, or solutions partially activates neural networks related to performing those same actions. This phenomenon supports observational learning, a fundamental ability in human evolution. Thanks to it, our ancestors could learn how to use tools, hunt, or navigate social situations without having to discover everything through trial and error. Although practice remains essential for mastering a task, carefully watching a skilled person prepares the brain to learn more quickly when the time comes to try it yourself. Before acting, the mind has already begun silently rehearsing. The brain devotes an enormous amount of energy to predicting the immediate future. At every moment, it tries to anticipate the next word you will hear, where a person will move, what sound will come next, or how the environment will change within a few seconds. These predictions allow us to react quickly and conserve resources because processing every piece of information from the beginning would be too slow. When predictions are correct, we barely notice the brain's work. But when they fail, we feel surprise, curiosity, or even confusion. Some neuroscientists believe that much of brain function can be understood as a prediction system that constantly updates its models of the world. We live a few moments behind the present, but the brain is always trying to move a few seconds ahead into the future so it can prepare us before events occur. Hearing an unexpected response can reorganize your memories of a conversation. When a conversation takes a completely different direction from what you expected, the brain reevaluates part of what you have just heard. Instead of storing every sentence separately, it reconstructs the overall meaning of the exchange using the new information. This process explains why, after an important revelation, earlier comments can suddenly seem to carry an entirely different meaning. Memory preserves not only the words, but also the interpretation we give them. When the context changes, the brain can reorganize the entire story so that it fits the new understanding. It shows that remembering also involves continuously reinterpreting the past in light of what we have just discovered. The brain automatically detects when someone is truly paying attention. During a conversation, the brain constantly analyzes signals such as the direction of the other person's gaze, body orientation, movement synchronization, and response timing. Without consciously thinking about it, it can often distinguish when the other person is genuinely engaged and when they are simply waiting for their turn to speak. These small signals activate systems related to trust and cooperation, influencing the quality of the interaction. Feeling heard can even change brain activity associated with emotional regulation, causing many people to experience a greater sense of safety and well-being. Before fully processing the words, the brain is already quietly evaluating the quality of the attention it receives. Important memories usually preserve meaning more than exact details. As the years pass, memory tends to retain the essence of an experience while smaller details gradually disappear. We may remember perfectly that a conversation changed our life, yet forget the exact words that were spoken. Neuroscientists believe this process allows the brain to store more useful information while using fewer resources. Instead of preserving every moment as a complete recording, the brain keeps what it considers most relevant for understanding the world and making future decisions. Our personal history eventually becomes a collection of meanings rather than perfectly reconstructed scenes. What remains for decades is usually the lesson, not every individual detail. Our brain can notice a threat before identifying exactly what caused it. Sometimes we feel immediate uneasiness when entering a place or meeting someone without yet knowing why. This happens because certain brain structures rapidly process signals associated with possible threats before the cerebral cortex finishes analyzing them in detail. A subtle change in a facial expression, an unexpected movement, or an unusual sound can activate this warning system within only a few tenths of a second. Only afterward does the conscious mind attempt to determine what caused the feeling. This mechanism allowed our ancestors to react quickly to sudden dangers even before they fully understood what was happening. The warning comes first. The explanation usually arrives a few moments later. Learning at different times of day strengthens memory flexibility. Practicing a skill under the same conditions every time can cause the brain to associate it closely with that specific context. However, when learning takes place at different times, with small variations in the environment, knowledge becomes more adaptable and easier to retrieve in new situations. The brain learns to separate the information from the context in which it was acquired, allowing it to be used more easily in different settings. This principle appears in academic learning as well as in athletic or musical skills. Slightly varying the conditions during practice helps build stronger and more versatile memories, prepared to function beyond the place where they were created. The brain pays special attention to sudden changes in the tone of a voice. While we listen to another person speak, the auditory system does not analyze only the words. It also continuously monitors rhythm, volume, speed, and variations in vocal tone. A sudden change in any of these elements can capture our attention even when we are distracted. Over thousands of generations, detecting abrupt changes in another person's voice could warn of danger, intense emotion, or important information. Today, that same mechanism explains why a simple shift in intonation can make us immediately look up or stop thinking about something else. The voice carries much more than meaning. It also communicates the internal state of the person speaking. Remembering a place activates a kind of internal map in the brain. When you think about a familiar room, a street from your childhood, or the route to your home, certain specialized neurons begin to partially recreate that space. These networks allow us to navigate, calculate distances, and imagine routes without physically moving. Researchers discovered that certain cells change their activity depending on where we believe we are, forming a genuine internal navigation system. Thanks to this mental map, we can plan routes, imagine shortcuts, or remember locations visited many years ago. Every important place leaves a representation inside the brain that remains available long after we have left it. Pauses during a conversation help the brain better understand what it has just heard. The silence between two sentences is not simply an absence of words. During those brief moments, the brain organizes the information it has received, connects new ideas with previous knowledge, and prepares to understand the next message. When someone speaks too quickly and without pauses, this integration becomes more difficult, increasing the likelihood of missing important details. Natural pauses act as small spaces where the mind places each piece before continuing to build the complete meaning. Often, we truly understand an idea not while it is being spoken, but during the brief silence that follows immediately afterward. The brain remembers best what manages to surprise it without being completely unfamiliar. If an experience is entirely predictable, it demands very little learning. If it is too strange, it may be difficult to understand and store. Between those extremes lies a point where novelty is strong enough to capture attention but can still be connected to previous knowledge. It is precisely within that balance that learning reaches its greatest effectiveness. Researchers believe the brain constantly seeks experiences that slightly challenge its expectations without completely breaking them. There it finds the perfect combination of stability and discovery. It is the same principle that makes many puzzles, stories, and scientific discoveries fascinating. They contain enough surprise to awaken curiosity and enough familiarity to be understood. The brain never stops reorganizing itself while you are awake. Although we often associate neuroplasticity with learning major skills, the brain actually modifies the strength of millions of neural connections throughout the day. Every conversation, every decision, every recalled memory, and every new experience produces small adjustments across different brain networks. Most of these changes are tiny and imperceptible, but when accumulated over weeks, months, and years, they eventually shape the functional architecture of the mind. There is no such thing as a completely finished brain. As we live, think, and learn, our nervous system continues transforming silently, adapting to a world that never stops changing. Brain can learn complex rules without you being aware that you have learned them. We often acquire abilities without being able to explain exactly how we did so. When learning a language, practicing a sport, or playing a video game, the brain detects regularities and automatically builds internal models. Over time, we begin to anticipate what will happen next or which action is best, even when we cannot describe the rules in words. This phenomenon, known as implicit learning, shows that an important part of human knowledge develops outside conscious awareness. Before we can explain a skill, the brain has already spent hours quietly finding patterns. It is a form of intelligence that works behind the scenes, allowing us to function in complex environments without deliberately analyzing every decision. Confidence can make the same idea seem more convincing than the evidence. When someone expresses an opinion with complete certainty, the brain tends to interpret it as more credible, even when the objective evidence is limited. Various studies show that the confidence with which a message is delivered influences how truthful it appears. This happens because the brain uses confidence as a quick clue for evaluating information when it lacks the time or knowledge needed to analyze all the evidence. However, confidence and accuracy do not always go together. The most confident people are not necessarily the most correct. Being aware of this bias helps us value the evidence more than the tone in which someone presents it. Your brain automatically adjusts the speed at which it perceives speech. When we listen to someone speak very quickly or very slowly for several minutes, the brain begins to recalibrate its expectations about the normal rhythm of language. Thanks to this adaptation, we can understand conversations delivered at very different speeds without feeling that every word requires extraordinary effort. This adjustment also occurs when we hear different accents or styles of pronunciation. Instead of requiring everyone to speak exactly the same way, the brain continuously modifies its internal models to interpret language more efficiently. This remarkable flexibility explains why, after spending time with people from another region, many expressions that once seemed difficult eventually sound completely natural. First impressions can also change when the brain receives enough new information. Although first impressions form extremely quickly, they do not necessarily last forever. When a person repeatedly behaves in ways that contradict the initial impression, the brain begins updating its representation. However, this change usually requires more evidence than was needed to create the original impression. Psychologists believe this phenomenon reflects a balance between stability and adaptation. Maintaining completely rigid opinions would prevent learning, but changing them constantly would make social behavior unpredictable. For this reason, the brain gradually modifies its judgments when it encounters enough evidence that reality no longer matches the image it had constructed. Brain uses context to decide which memories to retrieve. When you try to remember a specific fact, memory does not search through every recollection one by one. Instead, it uses the current context as a clue to narrow the search. The place where you are, the people around you, your emotional state, and even environmental sounds help activate related memories. This mechanism allows a scent, a photograph, or a song to trigger memories that seemed completely forgotten. Memory works like an enormous network of associations in which every experience is connected to many others. Finding the right clue can open a path that quickly leads to memories that have not appeared for years. Your brain can learn to ignore constant sounds so it can focus on what matters. If you live near a busy road or work in a place with a permanent hum, there will probably come a time when you stop noticing it consciously. This happens through a process called habituation, in which the brain gradually reduces the attention devoted to repetitive stimuli that do not represent a threat. By no longer continuously processing those sounds, it frees resources to detect changes that are truly relevant in the environment. Without this mechanism, every small noise would constantly compete for our attention, making concentration much more difficult. The brain does not only learn what it should hear, it also learns what it can stop hearing. Surprise strengthens learning because it forces the brain to update its predictions. Whenever something completely unexpected happens, the brain compares what occurred with what it had anticipated. If the difference is large enough, an intense learning signal is generated, encouraging the formation of new neural connections. This is why we often remember events that broke our expectations better than those that happened exactly as imagined. Surprise acts as a signal that the mental model needs correction. Rather than being merely a passing emotion, it is a powerful biological tool designed to help us understand a constantly changing world. The brain can separate one person's voice even when several people are speaking at the same time. In a gathering filled with simultaneous conversations, the auditory system manages to focus on a single voice while partially reducing the others. To accomplish this, it analyzes tiny differences in frequency, rhythm, spatial location, and the vocal quality of each speaker. This ability, known as auditory segregation, allows us to follow a conversation even in surprisingly noisy environments. Although it may seem like a simple process, it represents one of the most complex computational challenges the brain performs each day. While we believe we are simply listening to one person, millions of neurons are continuously separating sounds that reach our ears completely mixed together. Overthinking an automatic skill can temporarily make it worse. Many athletes, musicians, and drivers experience a curious phenomenon. When they try to consciously analyze every movement involved in a skill they have already mastered, their performance can decline. This happens because many expert actions are carried out through automatic circuits developed after thousands of repetitions. Interrupting that automatic process with too much conscious control can make movements less fluid. Sports psychologists have known about this phenomenon for decades and recommend focusing more on the goal than on every detail of the movement during performance. Once a skill reaches a high level of automaticity, trusting the training is usually more effective than trying to consciously control every step. The brain is constantly comparing reality with what it expected to find. Every sight, every sound, and every sensation represents an ongoing conversation between the information arriving through the senses and the predictions generated by the brain itself. When the two match, perception flows quickly and we barely notice the mental effort. When they differ, surprise, curiosity, or the need to pay closer attention appears. Some researchers believe this principle explains a large part of modern brain function. Far from being a passive observer, the brain acts as a tireless predictor that constantly tries to stay ahead of events. We experience the present, but the mind works without rest to construct the next moment before it happens. Uncertainty keeps the brain attentive for longer than an immediate answer. When we know the answer right away, activity related to searching decreases quickly. However, when the outcome remains uncertain but seems attainable, the brain keeps networks associated with attention, memory, and motivation active for longer. This mechanism explains why puzzles, mysteries, and open questions can keep us thinking for hours. As long as there is a possibility of discovering an answer, the nervous system continues exploring alternatives, rejecting hypotheses, and forming new connections. Curiosity does not arise only from wanting to know something. It also emerges because the brain finds it especially difficult to abandon a question it feels it is close to solving. The brain can learn another person's rhythm without either person noticing. After spending a long time together, friends, family members, or couples often begin speaking at similar speeds, making similar pauses, and even using equivalent expressions. This happens because the brain continuously adapts social behavior by observing those around us. Little by little, it incorporates other people's communication patterns until they begin to feel natural. This synchronization improves mutual understanding and reduces the effort required to maintain a smooth conversation. Although many people believe they speak exactly as they always have, the brain has spent years quietly adjusting the way they communicate to bring it closer to the people in their everyday environment. Brain distinguishes between an accidental mistake and a repeated one. Not all mistakes produce the same neural response. When we make an unexpected error, the brain generates a strong correction signal intended to prevent it from happening again. However, when the same mistake is repeated continuously, the system begins changing its learning strategy, searching for deeper changes instead of simple, immediate adjustments. Researchers believe this difference allows the brain to use resources more efficiently, quickly correcting occasional failures while devoting more time to changing deeply rooted habits. Every mistake contains valuable information, but the brain carefully analyzes whether it is an isolated accident or a sign of a problem requiring a completely different solution. Imagination can activate real physiological responses. Thinking intensely about a situation can produce measurable changes in the body even when nothing is actually happening. Imagining an exciting scene can accelerate the heart rate, visualizing sour food can stimulate salivation, and remembering an embarrassing moment can cause the face to blush. This happens because the brain uses many of the same networks to mentally represent an experience that it uses to live through it directly. Although it can distinguish between reality and imagination, the physiological responses may partially overlap. This remarkable ability makes imagination a powerful tool for rehearsing situations, preparing for challenges, and learning without having to physically experience every possible scenario. The mind remains one of the greatest mysteries we know. Every discovery brings us a little closer to understanding consciousness, memory, and thought, but it also reminds us how much remains to be explored. When we look inward, we are not only studying the brain, but also what makes us human.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.